mill fired up after not running it for a little while. Still have some melting snow, but it's like 50 degrees out today, so it's pretty nice out. So we're gonna work on milling up some. So I think the next project we're gonna do is add on to the back of that. So we're gonna add that as storage for wood. So we're gonna, I already have the beams cut. We're gonna scavenge those from a project we were gonna do, kind of shift gears. So do that, and then we need some trusses or some rafters. So we'll mimic the 3x4s that we did up there, and we'll do it out of this red oak right here. It's long enough, and it's kind of what we have on hand that will be strong enough. We have some cherry that's so-so. It's been sitting around for a little while. And then some of the aspen, we may be able to use it. And then everything else is like walnut or hickory. So we'll save that for something else. We'll save that for once we actually get you know, a place to store more wood. We'll get this stuff cut up and get it stored, and so it can start drying. But that's kind of the predicament we're in right now, is we don't have a good spot to store wood. So even though we could easily cut all this up and get it nice boards out of it, we don't have any place to store it that would, you know, not be just out in the mud essentially. So we're going to kind of create a spot there. So we're going to start working on getting stuff cut for that. So we'll start with this red oak, and then we'll switch to some of this other stuff to get 2x4s out of, and kind of some of the other building material that we need. But we already have like the 2x10s cut, so we should be good there. So anyway, let me get the tractor bucket out of the way. So we headed up here, kind of had stuff switched around for dealing with the snow. That's gone, so get the bucket out of the way, get that tote out of the way, and get some stuff moved around so that I can get this picked up and get it on the mill, and we'll start getting some of the 3x4s that we need out of this piece. And we need 7 of them. We should be able to get everything out of this, but we'll just have to see how that works out. So welcome back to the Schmitter's 100 Acre Woods. So as you saw, we're getting this red oak loaded up onto the mill. So doing the first cut on this. It's been a little while since we've run the mill, so we let it run for a good little bit here. Finally starting to get rid of most of the snow that was on the ground, and have just a little bit of frost in this, so we'll see how it does. Kind of cutting along and see if we need to change anything as we cut. Working on mostly construction material here, so if we end up with, you know, not perfect boards, we're not super concerned about it. Since it will be all construction, we're not going to try to plane it or anything like that. So if we end up with some deviation or, you know, imperfection in it, you know, we'll be able to kind of bend it back or, you know, utilize as is. Today is one of the days that finally warmed up a little bit, so the outside's starting to thaw a little bit, but the side that was still in contact with the ground still had some ice buildup on it. So these first cuts just kind of going slow, and running that debarker to try to get any of the dirt off. This log was fairly dirty to begin with, just from how we got it out initially, but running that debarker gets most of it off. So I get those pulled off. This one's either 14 or 16 foot long, I don't remember exactly. But either way, pretty decent length. And this red oak is extremely heavy, so you'll see we end up moving the tractor closer with the forks several times. And then I'm just showing what we're gonna be cutting. So those are the 3x4 rafters. So we have the 3 inches that we went down, and then we'll be able to get a 4x out of that then. we'll just sister up to the trusses that are already there to extend up the back. I go over that more kind of at the end of the video, kind of showing more exactly what we're going to do off the back of this building. So as I was mentioning, we end up bringing the tractor up to get most of this stuff off of the mill, just because it is super heavy. It's not super convenient to pick up, so move the tractor over so that we can just kind of slide it onto the forks. And there, using that 14-inch straight edge, we're actually kind of able to use it to see if there's any dips in the log, and kind of using it as a check to see whether or not we're having a lot of variation. So there, go ahead and get it rotated and start getting cuts on this side to get it flat. So you notice we ended up with these headsets, so using these earmuffs just because the mill at full tilt does end up getting pretty loud, but these have the walkie-talkie built in, so Dad and I are able to communicate while the mill's running. A lot of times we're trying to communicate measurements or anything back and forth between each other, and you just can't hear over the mill. So we're going to try those out and see how they work. First impression is pretty good. Definitely going to save our hearing with that diesel engine running, and communication wise it's definitely nice to have that because it's right there. And it's just a normal walkie-talkie frequency, so it's not using phones or anything like that. So here we kind of figured out a method to getting these off a little bit easier. So use the hookaroon to pull it off just a little bit. He picks up an end and then I slide just a piece of pipe under. So instead of having that wood on wood contact, you can then use that pipe as a spot to roll and then have it at a slight angle, so he can kind of push that one end onto the tractor while I move it up close, and then can finish sliding it over. So once you get that one end on, you can then kind of scooch and put it on, and then I can go ahead and back away just because otherwise we're up against the mill. So just one of those things we found for these really heavy boards, to make it a little bit easier to move them around and get them on and off the mill. So like this one, we ended up taking several slabs off the front end because we wanted to reduce that weight before we rotated it. And there, just showing, I think we're going to get a 2x4 out of this one. We went through and kind of figured we need 7 of the 3x4s to sister up to the current rafters, and I think in the end we ended up with about 11 of them. So it gives us a couple extras if there's some that are really bad or have a big bow on them. Those give us a couple extras to choose from there. Just continuing through, getting this cleaned up a little bit. Finally get this camp made. And then one thing we do kind of along here is check the debarker to see if it's still lined up like it should be. So I don't think I have a whole lot of video of that specifically, but basically just making sure that the debarker's actually traveling where the blade is. So we made a small adjustment there kind of while we're doing this, just to make sure that that was still all lined up, since we did change the blade adjustment just a little bit a few months ago. So I just wanted to confirm all that, and there was just a couple of adjustment screws on the debarker to move that up and down to adjust for the blade position. Alright, so someone was asking how you know when to change the blade. So this is one of those instances where it's past time, so I don't know how well it will show up on camera. But like here, you're cutting along, and then like you have an up and then a down. So this has gotten pretty wavy. So two things could be causing this. It could be that it's partially frozen, because we've had really cold days. Today it's like in the 50s. Stuff's starting to thaw, so it could be partially frozen, partly thawed, and it's just picking that grain. But we did have a fairly dull blade, so we did change it out. We put a 4 degree on, which after doing some research sounds like it's the best for like frozen logs. Not sure about for the intermediate, but we're gonna try that and see. You can see down there at the bottom we have some waves too, so go ahead, change this out, see if that doesn't help. Kind of finishing these out, and then it'll help whenever we do the finishing cut on these to make sure we don't have waves in our rafters. So while we primarily use that to scrape out the log, you can also kind of put it along a log and see if you have any hills and valleys. So you can see there we kind of have kind of that low spot. There is a knot there, so that could be part of it. But that nice long scraper makes a really good straight edge to just kind of see if you have a lot of variation. And while this is all going to be construction lumber, it doesn't hurt anything to have a little bit of a mess to it or a wave, but anything we can minimize definitely would help. So pulling everything off that's done, putting it back here. This time, anything we pulled off that still needed to go back on the mill, we went ahead and put on the forks of the tractor so we could get it right back on. Kind of twofold: one, not having to move it as far, and second, this red oak is pretty heavy, so trying to move it around a lot would be better if we didn't have to. So kind of just set it on the forks to put it right back on. Poplar and stuff you can kind of move around a little bit easier and isn't as straining, but this red oak is a different story. So here, just kind of inspecting the log and trying to determine whether we should go ahead and change the blade, and kind of where we're at with it, whether we do it now or kind of finish up some cuts and then change it. So basically what I'm trying to show here is we're going to go ahead and cut the waste off the top. We'll flip the board over, and since we have waves on the bottom, we'll get that flipped over and do a straight cut on the bottom so that both sides are a little bit more uniform. For our rafters, it's not as important that they are perfectly straight, but for some of the other lumber, like these 2x material that we're going to use, it would be nice to have it a little bit straighter. So it's kind of what we're going to do here once we kind of get stuff cut to size. So we're getting some 2x4s, and I think maybe a 2x6 out of this, just kind of depending on what is available from this log. So we got that flipped over so that we could go ahead and work on getting the other side cleaned up since it had some waves to it. This is after we've changed that blade, so we are starting to get some better cuts now. Just with how many we cut out and what we're able to get out of this, we ended up with some extra rafters. So notice we ended up keeping that one that had some of the waves in it. We can go ahead and pick through some of these to get what we want. So like out of that one, we should be able to get about 3 or 4 out of it, depending on kind of how far that part comes around the backside. So here's a look at the rafters that we're getting. So you can see like the one on the left hand side has a pretty good spot in it, and the middle one, so you can kind of see when we change the blade based on some of the curves that we're getting. Here's what we got. Have some 2x material, some 10s, an 8, and we have a 6 and a 5 there, and then these are going to be our rafters. They're 3x4s, so I have a little bit of wave to them. Probably should have changed the blade a little bit sooner, and possible that the log was partially frozen, but for the rafters it won't matter as much. But we needed 7, we have 11 here, so that'll give us some extras to work with if we have to sub some out. And then just quick, I'm trying these out today. Just have a built-in microphone so we can talk to each other. At some point, once we use this a little bit more, I'll do a in-depth kind of review of those and talk about them a little bit more, how they work, some of their features. Honestly, we've just used them the one time, and we're hoping to use them at the 100 acres as well, whenever kind of in the woods and we're both in different locations, hoping that we can utilize those for communication without having to have cell phones and everything. Alright, so I'm going to revisit these boards real quick, maybe try to show a little bit better some of the waves in them. Now they've kind of dried a little bit, it may be easier to see, I'm not sure, but so these here are 3x4s that we cut to use as rafters. So essentially, I kind of explained this yesterday, but what we want to do is extend onto the back of this, go out about another 14 feet, and basically allow it to be storage that can be used for storing wood. So essentially, we would take the dirt that's here, kind of level it off, take this retaining wall and curve it along that way, and kind of create a ditch along the backside so it can have a curtain drain that goes out and around, and then have it go down that way. So again, we have some slope here, so down there is pretty good, and then you start to get more. So take this dirt out and kind of get it leveled up, and then basically take our roof line and just continue it out, like I said, about 14 feet, and then we'll have 3 posts, so one on each end and then one in the middle. So it'll create a fair amount of space that we can store boards. I'm not 100% sure if we'll be able to store them, like bundled up and be able to get the tractor back here. It's kind of wet, and then we'll have some height restrictions, but either way, it'll be a good spot where we can store boards. It'll be undercover and have some place that we can kind of let stuff dry before we use it. So because we have some cherry and walnut and hickory over here that we still need to mill up, And you know, one of those things that's kind of holding us up right now is we could go through and mill all that. We just don't really have the room here to store it reasonably. I mean, in theory, we could just, you know, store it like out someplace, but it'd be better if it were undercover. And like in the back here, we won't close it in, so it'll have plenty of airflow and be able to do that. So that's the waste we had off of it, but kind of show here. It's like some of these spots here where it kind of cups in, pretty evident, and then down there. So for the rafters, we aren't too concerned with it. So I guess that kind of goes back to, you know, someone once asked about, you know, when to change the blade. And I kind of touched on this yesterday whenever we were doing it, but you know, it's potentially dull, so that was one thing. Yesterday we had thawed and frozen wood, so that's going to create waves. So we have those two things kind of working against us. The other thing is, so those are the two main things kind of working against us, and I guess it kind of goes back to, you know, we were trying to do cuts and knew it was going to be construction lumber where it didn't matter as much some of the waves. So we kind of worked through, you know, kind of got to a point where we got most of like the outside done, because there was a lot of dirt on this log just from how it got drug out initially and everything. So we knew that was going to be kind of a culprit going in, and that was going to dull the blade faster. That wasn't the first use on that blade. We'd had some cuts on it already, but what we did was we did change it, and then on some of the 2x material that we cut, where you want it to be a little bit nicer or not have the waves in it, once we changed the blade, we did a cut and then flipped it over and then did another cut to get most of those waves out. So that definitely helped. So like the 2x10s and 2x8s that we have are much better. And even on the rafter ones, you can kind of see which ones were part of the first batch that we did, or first cuts that we did, because they aren't too bad. But then the further, you know, into the log you get, we ended up with more variation in it. So again, we weren't too concerned in this application. If you are trying to cut, you know, really nice boards that, you know, cherry, walnut, hickory, that you're going to use for a project, obviously not acceptable. You'd have to run that through a planer so many times to get something usable that you'd be down to a toothpick. So part of its application. The other thing is the time of year milling. So if we really wanted good cuts, we should have waited for that log to finish thawing out, just because that's going to be, I think, a big culprit. And we don't have a lot of experience kind of doing that. You know, this is only our second season now, having the mill through kind of a cold snap. So, you know, we're still kind of learning as we go as well. So, you know, it's kind of one of those learning processes, and just kind of figuring out what works best. And like right now, you know, in southern Indiana, yesterday it was 50 degrees. Right now it's actually about 70 degrees outside with a slight wind. So you just never know what the temperature is going to be. But they're talking about a snowstorm next week and being back into the 20s. So anyway, this is what we got out of that tree. So we need 7 of these to sister up to here, so we'll get those. We have the posts that we'll use, and we'll probably just put those in the ground and not worry about the concrete on those. It'll speed up the process, and like I said, we're gonna have that cold snap again, so getting all the concrete in will be, we'll have to wait further into the season, whereas if we just put them in the ground, we'd be able to do it sooner. But we'd be able to get part of that done. We have this, we have some of these, and then this is actually the other wood that we'll utilize. So this is stuff that we originally cut and talked about using at the back of the shed here. So we talked about building kind of the same structure there back. We still want to do that. I think just for it's going to be a lot more involved. So we want to kind of mimic the shape and everything of the shed and go back with it. To do that, we're going to have to tear off the back, get back into the shed to sister things up to it, and then work our way out. It's going to be a lot more involved, and we really want a spot where we can get some of these logs milled up and stored, so that before they start to go bad and we waste them. So that's why we're going to work on this first. Essentially, we just have the 3 posts. We'll be able to sister right up to these, and then use some of these as the beams that will tie the posts together, and then have a spot for the rafters to sit on. Very much like we did over here. So essentially, same kind of thing. We'll be able to butt up back into on that building, and then just have a spot for those rafters to sit. So be very similar design as we did here. Just do it off the back. I don't know, I think we figured once if we go out 14 feet what our height would be. And I think we kind of figured that we'd have it still at least about 6 feet. I don't remember that for sure, but kind of went through and figured that. That was kind of our limiting factor as far as how far out to go, was what your height would be with that pitch roof. So anyway, just wanted to kind of talk through what we cut these for, and kind of show you some of the issues with the milling. Not everything you mill is obviously going to be 100%. So many factors that go into it, whether it be the blade, the speed that you cut, the tension, or just the log itself. And again, depending on the project that you're working on, kind of can help steer what is acceptable for that project. And like for our rafters, the wood that is stored under there is not going to care about that. As long as they're pretty straight this way, which they have some that have a little bit of a curve to them, but we'll be able to get that worked out. I believe that shouldn't be an issue. So anyway, I have this wood. We'll probably try to get it stacked up and stickered, just so that if it does want to do any more twisting while it dries a little bit, it hopefully kind of helps stabilize that, and by doing that, it also kind of gives us a chance to get it on the fork stickered, so that if we need to move it around, we can kind of move it around a little bit easier with the tractor, because the red oak is pretty heavy. So if we can avoid moving this around by hand as much as possible, that would be much preferred. Okay, one more thing I want to add. So I know some people had asked in the past about using some of the sawdust and stuff for kind of the wet areas that we have. So this is an area where obviously we have logs, and we have a lot of runoff now from the roofs that kind of come here. We need to get some gutters and stuff on there and kind of direct it around. But either way, we have this area that kind of holds moisture, but we need to kind of get to. It's one of the paths, so just for perspective, I'm just downhill here from the mill. So we've been dumping the sawdust. You can see that's the red oak stuff we just had. Been dumping the sawdust down here. So we have kind of some of the stuff from the mill, but then also kind of this stuff here is from the 55-gallon drum from like doing the planer and joiner. So that's kind of the sawdust here. So we've been putting it in this area to see how it does as far as kind of creating a layer, I guess you could say, of protection from the mud. So, you know, I think for walking on it, it's not bad. Getting a machine in here, if it's not frozen, you're just going to sink right down through it, at least with the big machine. The other one, I'm not sure how it would do, but we are trying that out here, so kind of see how that works. Right now, still have a little bit of that snow and some of the gravel from the driveway has been pushed down here now, so we're gonna have that gravel here as well, but it'll mainly be the sawdust that we'll kind of put in and see how it does as far as kind of creating that barrier between the mud, and see if it's a good or bad thing. You know, it's one of those, once it gets wet, it's going to hold the moisture in the wood, so it could be a bad thing, but if it kind of creates that barrier to where you can at least go out and it's not just complete mud, that could be good. So kind of time will tell, see how this does, but we have started to do that, so we'll kind of track it and see you know, if it's a good or bad thing and how it works kind of in this application. And it's an area where it'll see some foot traffic, and then it is a path for the machines, so we'll kind of see how it does then with the machines driving on it, whether it does anything or if it's, you know, kind of counterproductive since it's holding that moisture in the wood. So we'll just watch that and see how it does, and see if it's been if it will be beneficial or not. So the length of kind of these boards and kind of our limited storing spot, we go ahead and we hand move all of this stuff and put it just downhill from Ruby. So basically it's an area that we have pretty open. It's mostly covered. If we have strong winds and stuff, you may have some moisture get in there, but overall it's not terrible. So you know, all the direct rain won't get on it. So basically we go ahead, get all the boards moved over, we go ahead and bind them kind of in two groups. So we go ahead and get all the 2x material in there and get it strapped together, and then go ahead and get the rafters over and get them stacked and bound together kind of separately. Since it'll kind of be two separate processes of doing that, go ahead and do it separate. So we'll go ahead and let this dry a bit, and we'll get back to this lumber whenever we start building on. So stay tuned to watch getting this addition built on. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.